One. Welcome to Santa Barbara Talks with Josh Molina. I'm here today with one of my newest colleagues, somebody who has been incredibly impressive in a short amount of time. So I'm very much looking forward to this conversation about journalism and sports and his background. Diego Sandoval, new Noozhawk sports editor. And that's so cool. And you're doing a great job. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you for the kind words. Thanks for having me on. It's going to be interesting. I'm usually not the one getting interviewed, so it's a little role reversal, but I'm looking forward to it. And thanks for having me on again.
Yeah, well, my pleasure. It's been so cool to work with you the last
Mhm.
several months. You know, initially as kind of a freelancer, and then getting hired as sports editor, and it's exciting. And I have to say, as a veteran journalist who loves journalism and has worked with a wide variety of journalists over the years, I've been really impressed with your abilities, your skill, your enthusiasm, and the way you've really hit the ground running in this position. So I'm excited to talk to you. What does it mean, Diego? You're the new sports editor for Noozhawk. So talk to me about your plans, your vision, what people have already seen, and what they can expect in the future.
Yeah, means a lot. First of all, to kind of move up quickly. It was kind of in the cards. I got hired in June as a sports writer, but Barry Punzel, who just stepped down, was a great mentor, but it was always kind of his plan to step down at some point this year, and so had kind of a sense that was coming. But it's amazing to be able to be put in this position so early. We'll get into my background later, but I remember I was an athlete in Santa Barbara, and so I remember seeing my name in Noozhawk and knowing that feeling and kind of being able to be the person now that give these high school athletes that feeling of, oh, people are acknowledging what I'm doing is really special, and I'm really grateful to be able to do that. In terms of what you've already seen, I just finished up my first fall sports season. There are still a couple athletes involved in some playoffs that are trickling in, but it was a great year of football, tennis, golf, volleyball, all those kind of fall sports. And one thing I was really kind of trying to bring to it is more of you know, a presence on social media for Noozhawk Sports, because with sports journalism specifically, obviously social media is growing everywhere, but sports journalism is kind of moving to a much more social media dominated world where you have live tweeting, where that's how people watch games, that they may not necessarily tune into 3 hour long broadcasts of games anymore. They just want the quick hitting updates. And so I've tried to bring a lot of that to the Noozhawk Sports Twitter. It's at Noozhawk Sports. Um, Live tweeting games, just so in the moment, if you're not able to go out to a game, you can kind of still follow along through Noozhawk. And that's something that we deal with in Santa Barbara when there's 7 high schools. Some schools have up to 20 games. There's going to be a lot of crossover, and so people that want to go, you know, to multiple games but can't, are able to kind of follow them all through Noozhawk. And so that's one thing that I'm kind of trying to bring to the table, is that growth on social media, because again, that's where a lot of the audience is almost moving to. And then just kind of keeping it, you know, focused on the local high school athletes. I know there's a lot in Santa Barbara, UCSB, City College, Westmont. You look at those big three, and you could have a publication just based off the Santa Barbara colleges. But knowing that the high schools, there's so many schools in Santa Barbara, it's very unique that there are 3 big public schools, there's 4 private schools. It's a lot, and I think I take a lot of pride, and Noozhawk takes a lot of pride in being the people that can, showcase these high school athletes, because we have a lot of talent and we have a lot of great sports teams. San Marcos boys water polo just won the CIF title. It's really a thriving community for sports where, maybe not in the bigger sports. Football, Santa Barbara High football is a great team, but even the, girls water polo, beach volleyball, Santa Barbara really thrives in those kind of sports. And I think that's one thing the other thing I really want to bring to this is kind of highlighting the fact that Santa Barbara is a special community for high school sports, and it's not something that you see every day.
Yeah, definitely. Well said. And I know the community really loves high school coverage because kids, families, parents, they don't have a lot of places to turn to. There's been a lot written about the Santa Barbara News Press, and obviously they're out of business. Back in the day, right, people loved the News Press because that was your local place where you would see the sports coverage, and you had guys like Mark Patton and John Zant and Barry and Chick,
Yeah.
Dan Shields, and all these people who covered all of this stuff. And then that kind of started to decline. And then we saw Presidio Sports, which tried to make a run at it online. And so there was some sports coverage. And there's the Independent, and Victor Bryant does sports coverage there and does a good job there. And then, we have Noozhawk, which has been for a while been kind of the go-to place in the absence of other outlets ever being able to fill up that old hole that the news press left for the high school sports and for the college sports. And parents love that stuff. Like, you just want to see your kid's name in print, a little mention, maybe a photo, and there's nowhere else to go for that anymore. I mean, well, the places I outlined, but it has just changed so much. So what you're doing is really essential. And a lot of news focuses on government, city hall, but everyday real families, they don't read that stuff. They want to read about what their youth is doing in the community. Talk to me about your approach, Diego. There's so many sports, so many high schools, so much to do. You're a Royal, you're a San Marcos grad. I won't hold that against you. Just kidding. How do you approach all this, like objectively, just like covering this stuff and prioritizing the news?
Yeah, that was something that I came in and I really wanted to kind of put in a structure of, okay, having these, and because you said it, there are so many things going on in the Santa Barbara sports world. I said it, 7 high schools, 3 colleges, and then on top of that, all the extracurriculars, half marathons, triathlons, competitions. There's everything offered here. And the way that I've done it and the way that Barry kind of handed it over to me is the main priority is high schools, because without Noozhawk, they're not covered anywhere else, basically. And, especially you get into, the lesser maybe followed teams, the golfs, the tennises, the beach volleyballs, where, most publications will cover their high school football, team, or their high school basketball team, because it's, the big market sport when you get older or you get to the college level. But Noozhawk, we cover every single sport for every single high school. And it is tough to know, we cover all of them. Obviously, some get more consideration, whether it's a rivalry game. Crosstown rivalry games are big. And then, obviously there are a lot of them, being that there's 7 schools. But I think it's just making sure there's equal coverage to all high schools. I try to get out to many of the high schools as I can. And if I can't, I rely a lot on, coaches do a great job sending in, box scores. They recap their games for me because, bottom line, there's 12 games happening, say tonight. Tonight I'm going to the San Marcos high school basketball opener, but there are 12, I think like 10 other games happening at the same time. So I go cover the San Marcos game, and the way I choose that is, it's the game in town, and it's kind of the most marquee matchup, opening night. There are a lot of factors that go into me deciding what games I go to in person. It's, the record of the team, if it's a playoff, contention type game, if it's, a sport I haven't been to yet, we're going to have basketball, girls water polo, both the soccer's heating up this year. So I'm starting with basketball and then hit every other sport from there. But, picking and choosing, it's hard a lot of the times, but, I try my best to be as even as possible and cover as many schools. And the bottom line is, if maybe I won't get out to a game or something like that, but if you send something into Noozhawk, I will write it up and get it onto the website as long as it's obviously, what we're looking for in terms of a story recap or stuff like that. And so, yeah, it's a lot, and it's sometimes tough to balance, but I try my best to kind of evenly spread out the coverage with obviously there's some, you know, here and there are, blips where it's a very important game. So maybe I'll cover, Santa Barbara basketball 2 times in a week because it's a big, rivalry game or it's big for their playoff push. But the bottom line is it's high schools, the better game, I decide. And then colleges kind of come next where they have their own information directors and stuff like that. So they get their stuff out into the world without Noozhawk or kind of, on their own. Whereas we're kind of like the second line is, hey, here's, if you didn't see this, here it is on Noozhawk. And then after that, it's, the community events and the more extracurricular stuff that we cover. And sometimes that's difficult to get to just because there's so much before that. And, me being the only full-time person on staff working on sports. But again, I try my best to get to as many things as possible and to be as even as possible. And yes, I am a San Marcos alum, so that it is in my blood a little bit. But yeah, I throw that out the window when I'm covering games.
Yeah, exactly. It's good though, right? You're invested in the
Mhm.
community and you have that history. And so context matters and you get all the
Yeah.
context. I want to ask you this question because you're doing sports coverage, but we are talking about kids, kids, 15, 16, 17, 18 in high school. And what is your approach in terms of what you write about, what you leave out of a story? Because, if you cover a Dodger game for the LA Times, the coverage is going to be as true and authentic, and sports writers are going to call out bad plays, bad coaching decisions. And in the world of youth sports and high school sports, that's it's a little different, right? In terms of the approach, because we are talking about kids who are still learning, right? And so can you talk
Mhm.
about your approach? Do you just focus on the positive plays? If a pitcher does something, do you call them out for something, or if there's an error in a game? What is your approach to accountability when you cover sports in high school?
Yeah. So sports, takes it kind of a different role, I feel like, with Noozhawk and with local journalism. Mark Patton wrote a column earlier this year about John Zant, and, he kind of called the sports department the toy department of the news press, where it's a bit more fun. It's more positive. You mentioned it earlier, where the other sections are talking about politics or current what's going on negative. A lot of the time sports is kind of the opposite, where you kind of get to have fun and read about these games. And yeah, you do have to be very careful with high school athletes because they are learning the game and they are still teenagers, and I can't write about them like how I write about even UCSB athletics. It's a whole nother world. At the Division I level, they're basically professionals at this point. So there you don't really have to tiptoe as much. You can kind of, tell it how it is. But at the high school level, you do kind of calling people out on the negatives. If there is, fumble, say in a football game, I'm not going to go out and say, so and so, made a bad decision and fumbled the ball, just because nobody really, would care much if it was left out. It's not that big of a, instead of maybe focusing on who fumbled the ball, you turn it around and say, so and so forced the fumble, and, flip it on the positive side. Who did the positive thing that kind of led to that play? And so it is shy away from losing people, say, or the negative side. Again, you have to still tell the story of the game, so those things can't really be omitted. Like, you can't just like kind of brush over the fact that a mistake was made leading to a game-winning, play or something like that. But it definitely is a line that you have to toe, where at least for me, I not to use an individual's name in a negative connotation at all, just because it is local sports. It's high school sports. These kids are learning, and these kids are, most of them are in it to have fun, and most of them are having fun. And so having the media there, they don't need the media bashing them, as a 14, 15-year-old playing a sport that they love. When you get older and you become the professional or the college level, it turns more into that, almost a profession or a job where you can get criticized and you kind of have to expect that. Whereas these kids now, they don't need that in their lives. They like the positive coverage, and as long as it tells the story of the game, I try my best to leave out any kind of negative connotation or anything like that towards individuals or even teams as a whole.
Right. Yeah, and it's good. And you have to do that because just like in professional sports, that coach gets mad at you, right? You might be
Yeah,
walked out of the locker room, right?
exactly.
And so
That
it's
that's
a
another thing
dance.
is maintaining that relationship because like we said, Noozhawk is the only publication in town that covers every sport, every school, that Santa Barbara has to offer. And so, if I come at a coach or a player and say, why do you do this? Why are you doing this wrong? Which is maybe something I would do at a higher level, they can easily just, not go to me anymore and not, give me the quotes I want or give me because like I said, I do rely on coaches and local, even parents to send me in stuff so that I can, report on these games. And so that also goes into it, is maintaining that positive relationship, because it is it's a give and take. We're both benefiting. We get their names out there and they kind of give us the information that we need. So it's definitely a dance that you have to do.
Definitely. And that's true. I cover a lot of government. It's the same thing.
Hmm.
You upset a council member, a staff member, all of a sudden you're reading some scoop and another publication. They'll get back to you. So it's that dance of accountability, but you also need to know your beat and know your sources. Diego, I've been very impressed with your knowledge and journalism skills and instincts and how well spoken you are. Yes, this is ageist. You're 22, but you
Yeah.
seem like a pro. I mean, it seems like you've been doing this for a long time already. Talk to me about journalism, and then we'll go into your background. But talk about journalism. Like, well, you're good at it, right? And you're a 22-year-old. Where does this come from? Like, why do you love journalism so much?
Yeah. So go back to my journey with journalism. It was around end of my junior year, beginning of my senior year at San Marcos. I kind of began thinking about what I wanted to do, because that's what they're doing these days with kids. You got to know exactly what you want to do when you grow up by your sophomore year of high school. But I was starting to apply for colleges, doing some research and kind of looking at what majors I might fit into. And sports had always been one of the biggest parts of my life. I played sports since I was, started baseball when I was 3, 4 years old. But one of the first outfits I ever wore as a little baby was a baseball onesie. So it's been in my life forever. And so something I really loved and was drawn to. Um, and I played baseball in high school, but around that time that I was, starting to acknowledge the fact that I probably wasn't going to play at the next level. And so, but I still had that love for sports, and I love to talk about it, and I love to watch it with friends and then, debrief after the game about what happened. And so I was looking for something sports related in a career. And so I came upon sports journalism. I've read sports articles, I've watched sports analysts on TV my whole life. I enjoyed, writing throughout school. So I thought, oh, we'll try it out. And I took the journalism class at San Marcos, my fall semester of senior year. Started writing for the King's Page. Mr. Orn was the professor. I also had him for AP US history, so I knew him, and he, invited me. I became the sports editor in a couple of weeks there,
Mm.
and I enjoyed it enough to apply to schools with the desired major of either communications or journalism. Um, and it worked out to where I ended up studying journalism. We can talk about that later. But my kind of love for journalism and the idea behind it started out as a love for sports, and journalism was kind of just like what followed suit. Like that allowed me to stay in sports, you know, longer in my life, and eventually my career. And that love for sports is absolutely still there. But the love for journalism has definitely grown and kind of become more, it was more like this, and it's become kind of closer to where sports and journalism are together, especially of late. And it's kind of grown for me, you know, when I was at Cal Poly, which I'm sure we'll talk about, was kind of a way for me to educate and inform the Cal Poly community about sports on campus, on a campus that, Cal Poly sports, it's not the biggest part of the, university like it is at a SEC school or all those other schools. So it was a way for me to kind of, hey, we have good sports here. Let's talk about it. And now just the fact that I've moved back home and journalism is now a valuable way for me to give back to the community that's given me so much, growing up, has, multiplied my love and my passion for journalism, immensely. So that's kind of how I got into journalism, and it's definitely grown, me enjoying journalism. Again, 4 or 5 years ago, I had no idea if I even enjoyed, writing about sports. I just knew I liked sports and I was decent at writing. And so it was definitely something that grew across, say, the college years were definitely the most impactful. But that's kind of my story with journalism.
There's so much talked about when it comes to print media dying, journalism shrinking, and young people constantly being on social media. Do your friends read newspapers, whether online or print? How do they get their sports, or are they just watching like Pat McAfee and his show, and you know um, sort of ESPN and these talkers? What's the Stephen A. Smith? Is that his name? Like,
Yeah.
is that how they get their sports, or are people reading sports like online or print publications anymore?
Yeah, it's very very little reading of the online publications. I know a lot of people that are subscribed to the Athletic and the bigger kind of organizations like that, and when they are sitting down and reading an article, it's much more likely to be a long feature article about an athlete, a player, a team, whatever it may be, that they're interested in. If it's just like a game that they want to learn about, or a player they want to kind of check up on, it'll rarely be through a publication. It's kind of the ESPN app, or the Bleacher Report app, all those kind of things. But then yeah, TV, I think, is the where sports journalism and sports media is thriving at the moment, because you know sports journalism, if we want to kind of delve into that world, is very interesting at the moment, because it feels like every day it's moving more and more into an entertainment industry rather than a hard journalism, which is obviously has been beneficial to those ESPNs or the Fox Sports. You have guys like Stephen A. Smith, Skip Bayless, or like Shannon Sharp, former players, Pat McAfee you mentioned, where they're making talking about sports like funny and exciting, and it's getting clicks, and it's
Right.
maybe not the best information that you're getting, but it draws you in, and it's entertaining to watch, because who wouldn't want to watch you know two guys who are very passionate argue about something that you're also passionate about.
Mhm.
And I think it is good, and there's a lot of room for that, clearly, and it's positive for the sports world because it's bringing people in, and it's entertaining to the viewer. But I do think a little bit more of a balance is needed, to where there can be that entertainment based and subjective side, but there also needs to be, maybe people that we elevate to the level of Stephen A. Smith, Skip Bayless, that are much more, here are the facts and here's what's actually happening. Let's not get into our opinions too much, because in the end, that's what journalism is. It's delivering, information and delivering stuff to the public. And so I'd say my generation is much more drawn to that entertainment based kind of journalism, where it's loud and it's exciting and it's fun. But I do think that we're still missing a little bit of the balance there, to where people don't have as many hard sources or hard journalists that they can go to and say, I trust this person 100%, and I understand what they're saying. And so to get back to your original question, it's social media is where people are watching a lot of the things that go down. Stephen A. Smith has his ESPN show, but obviously ESPN or Sports Center is going to post, 30-second clips of Stephen A. Smith throughout the day. And so people will see that and send it to each other and then talk amongst there. So I'd say the majority of kind of media intake is through social media at my age, whether that be Twitter or X, or Instagram. Those are kind of the main two in my demographic as of right now. And, there's a lot of information there. Obviously, we know the power of social media. And so I'd say that the use in my age group is definitely, going down in terms of reading publications for, what they were originally intended to be, as just like, here are the games that happened. You can now, go on Twitter and just scroll and you see all 15 NBA game final scores, and that's all you really need to know.
Right.
So it's definitely, social media, and then those apps that these, publications are developing, where it's so easy to just click and swipe and you got your news for the day, basically.
Yeah, and so much of that sports stuff, you kind of want those personalities in the coverage.
Right.
Do you hate Stephen A. Smith as much as everyone else seems to, or are you?
I don't hate him. Because I think with a bit of with the knowledge, the journalism knowledge that most people may not have, in that I think people just need to look at him more as an entertainer than an NBA analyst that knows his stuff. And obviously, he went up the ranks as a journalist, and was a beat writer, a columnist, but he's entered this whole nother realm where they're basically paying him to yell his opinion at other people. And you can't really look at that and say that's a journalist. That's a person that I can trust with 100%, and follow them with everything that they say. Whereas if you view him in the scope of, no, this is a guy that's on TV and trying to get clicks, and is in the sports world, and I can kind of respect that, because he's in his own almost little bubble. There are a couple guys, Pat McAfee's kind of in that realm too, where they're not supposed to be viewed as journalists or like hard-hitting analysts that will discuss the game 100% of the time. You might get rants and things like that, where that's not what a traditional journalist does. But because it's Stephen A. Smith, or because it's Pat McAfee, it's kind of entertaining, and you almost want that. So I think it's necessarily hate him. I don't think that he is. My thing about him is, just don't view him as an analyst, view him as an entertainer, and you kind of grow to accept it a little bit more, because when he came in, he's loud. He was very different than a lot of traditional, obviously sports journalists. But if you kind of switch the thinking on him, at least for me, it creates a new, almost like, branch of journalism that he's almost spearheaded in sports. And it's needed, and it's successful, obviously, but it's just, you need to view the two as almost separate entities.
Yeah, definitely. He's quite the character, and I like Pat McAfee because he does the WWE stuff, and that's kind of the stuff I love too, because they are athletes, and so that it's weird because that's why they do it, right? Like Pat McAfee, I knew he's like the punter and everything, and then he does that. I'm like, whoa! And now I'm watching his show, and it's entertaining. And you're a baseball player, so I'll throw you a curveball here and ask you a question on the spot here. I think it was Pat McAfee paid, the story was, Aaron Rodgers like $500,000 or something like that to do an interview on his show. And what do you think of that? Like you just said they're not journalists, so I get that, but the public kind of doesn't understand all that, right? The public just sort of sees it all as the same thing. But do you think it's appropriate for guys like that to be paying athletes for these interviews, and then guys like you are like trying to get a real interview? I mean, what do you think?
I think it is. It's not fair, I would say, to the people that didn't play in the NFL and don't have a show on ESPN. That they can't pay Aaron Rodgers X amount of money to be a recurring guest on their show.
Yeah.
But it is the direction that we're unfortunately heading, where these athletes are asking for more and more money every single year, and so far it's been kind of within the realm of sports where, they're asking for contracts from teams and the money keeps going up. But now you're seeing these athletes, that are saying, no, I can almost market myself. I don't have to go to the media and have interviews and do stories. That's why, I mean, the amount of professional athletes that have created their own podcasts in the past, year or two is unreal because, they're saying, you want to learn more about me through here, learn it through this medium that's going to make me more money rather than, go to a journalist or someone that's requesting a story and, have to deal with what they want to do. Let's do it on my own terms.
Yeah.
And so it's unfortunate for journalists, but I do think that it's a good thing that it's getting athletes identities and their kind of personal face and who they want to be represented as out there, because for a long time you see these athletes and they're nothing more than that. Oh, you better hit a home run or I'm going to be mad for the next 24 hours type of thing. Whereas, this whole past year I've been, watching Mookie Betts' podcast, and he's having, different athletes of the different players of the teams that they're playing every series on his podcast. So, the Dodgers are gearing up to play the D-backs. He has Corbin Carroll on his podcast. It doesn't make me hate Corbin Carroll. It makes me, enjoy him and, kind of root for him a little bit. So it's this interesting shift where athletes are almost taking their kind of what's put out there in the media and almost owning it for themselves because they have the power behind it. And so Aaron Rodgers can do that because, obviously he's getting a lot of money, but also now he kind of controls how he is viewed in the media because with him and Pat McAfee having a deal, I'm sure there's, on the back end, what questions can I ask? What questions can't I ask? And so from a true, pure journalism point of view, it's unfortunate to see because maybe we're not getting the full story anymore because these athletes are kind of, controlling what they say or controlling what is put out there about them. But if you look at it from a fan kind of perspective, it's fun because you're seeing more of these athletes. You're rather than them, you see them on the court and they go, and the next time you see them is on the court. Maybe you watch a podcast episode that night and you learn about, the behind the scenes part of the game, stuff like that. So there's give and take with kind of the current state of stuff like that and how the athletes are handling the media. But yeah, I think it just depends what point of view you kind of see it from.
Yeah, that's right. That's a stand-up double right there, Diego. You get that really well. Okay. So
Perfect.
So let's transition. Let's talk about you and growing up. I think it's so cool that you grew up in this community. You went to San Marcos High School, and you are back. You graduated from Cal Poly. You're giving back, working in the same community that helped raise you, And so let's take back to little Diego, right? Okay, so you played baseball since you were 3, T-ball or whatever. Talk to me about growing up in, I guess it would be Nolita. Did you grow up, I guess, if you went to San Marcos?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, right around, lived right near Bishop High School my whole life. So yeah, Nolita, that kind of, barrier there. But, I grew up appreciation for Santa Barbara that I think not a lot of, even people that were born in Santa Barbara and grew up there. I'm a 5th generation Santa Barbara native. So for 5 generations, my family's been here. And so I have pretty deep roots here. My grandparents still live here. Heavily involved in the kind of the community, especially the sports community growing up. Both my parents and both my grandparents on my mom's side graduated from San Marcos and grew up in Santa Barbara. So it's one of those things that I was kind of born into it, and there's not a lot not to love about Santa Barbara. I mean, it's hard. It was hard for me to leave for college, even just because you look at Santa Barbara and it's, why would you want to live anywhere else? But I mean, growing up here was great. There's a great community of people. When you find kind of your group of people here, they definitely bring you in. Growing up playing baseball, my dad was a coach. He was on the board at Goleta Valley South Little League. I played at Goleta Valley South from whenever they let kids start playing t-ball until they kick you out. And I spent, plenty of weekday afternoons and nights, running around the fields with my team. And then, in the summers, stay there. You play all-star baseball. Then you get to the fall and it's club baseball. So my world in Santa Barbara was definitely centered around baseball, but we had a great group of people that kind of, came together, and we were a great team on the field, but just having that group of people around you was really special throughout my childhood, and to have it in Santa Barbara was even better. And so when I got the opportunity to come back and work here, still living at my parents' house, but I'm 22. I got a little bit of time, but it's great to be back. And I love it here, and can't really ask for much more from a hometown that gave me so much. And so I'm trying to give back as best I could through this job. And like I said earlier, I knew what it was like, growing up, and you have a good game, and you're going home on the team bus, and you're wondering, oh, is my name going to be in Noozhawk tomorrow morning? Am I going to wake up and see, and so I remember what that feeling was like, waking up and checking, and then texting your friends, oh, you got in there twice for what you did. And then, to be able to do that now is very special, and I'm very grateful for it.
Yeah. Just want to dive a little bit into the sports baseball thing a little bit. I coached my son for every number of years. He played DP Little League. He's younger than you. He's 18, so you guys did not overlap. But those are the greatest, memories as a dad that I have, because like it isn't just like baseball isn't just like showing up and throwing the ball and hitting. What people who've not been part of that world don't understand is that you learn so much about yourself, about, your colleagues, your teammates, as a coach, other coaches, your dad coached, I coached, so much about the world. And there's all these other skills that come up more than just, throwing the ball, throwing bullpens and going through the routines before a game, and warm-ups. Can you talk to me about like what baseball meant to you as a youth sports, as a high school athlete, and how it still lives with you today, even though you're not, on the field playing?
Yeah. I think, baseball has very much shaped me into the person that I am today, just because, when you do something for, whatever, 15 years of your life, it's bound to have a pretty profound impact on you. And I think one of the ways I like to describe baseball is it's an individual sport, kind of disguised as a team sport, because you're in this team, and it's 9 against 9, but what it eventually comes down to is a pitcher against a hitter, and it's one-on-one. And I've kind of grown to realize that that's almost like, how you want to translate that view almost, into life, where you're going to have a team around you. You're going to have people, coworkers, friends, family, that are always going to be there and going to be on your side. But in the end, you got to do stuff for yourself. And so, you can have this team, and, they can get the bases loaded for you. But in the end, you're the one that's in the batter's box. You're the one that has to do the work. And so baseball kind of gives you that blend of experiences where you know how to work as a team, how to communicate with people, how to get a job done as a group. But then on the other side, how to step up individually when it's your time to do so. How to do things for yourself when it's just you up there. You kind of have nobody else to rely on, and it's almost like it's you against the world. And sometimes, life or whatever is thrown at you feels that way. And I think baseball does a great job at almost balancing that, where you get the aspects of a team sport where, you learn all those things, and that you meet people, and I have friends that I still speak to that I met when I was 5 years old playing t-ball. And just because, we were on the same team every year, and you build those bonds, but then you can also, grow stronger as an individual because of the nature of it, and because of the way you kind of have to go do things on your own. If you want to go hit on your own or throw it, you can do it by yourself, or just with one other person. And so baseball is such a unique sport that I think it provides a lot more kind of life lessons than some other sports may not, just because it has that interesting blend of individual and team identity where they're both equally important, but you have to kind of give and take with both of them, and that's kind of you know replicated in life in many different facets.
Yeah, I think that that's perfectly said. And just to add on to that, the repetition of baseball, like you do the same thing over and over and over. Like you're a middle infielder, I mean, how
Yeah.
many freaking ground balls did you field, right? How many times you're like, I'm so tired of this, but you still love it. You learn something every time, right?
Yeah.
And that the pregame warm-ups, right? Routine, but it's discipline. And then learning accountability, you get the call to steal, right? You do it. You listen to your coach. You do not
Hmm.
not listen to your coach. But once you go, right? And that's all
Yeah.
on you. And there's so much, it's like life skills. And I can kind of tell
Hmm.
who's played baseball, right? Because there's like most baseball players take personal responsibility for their actions. It's like a really cool
Hmm.
trait, and they're really self-motivated and hardworking.
Yeah.
Um, what do
And
you go? Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
the other thing about baseball is it's naturally a losing sport. If you succeed 3 out of 10 times, you fail 7 out of 10 times, you're a Hall of Famer. Like there's no other sport that's like that, to
Yeah.
where you can be not succeed at what you're supposed to do the majority of the time and still be considered a great player. And so I think that in and of itself, just the fact that knowing that you are going to strike out, you are going to make an error, you are going to roll over to the shortstop amount of times in the season, just the fact, like, knowing that that is true kind of gives you a different mindset on things, to where failing or not achieving a goal maybe doesn't have as much of an impact on you, because that that's okay, and that's just the nature of the sport. And then carrying it over to other aspects of life, failing happens, and people, it happens all the time, and you're not going to achieve your goals the first time around. And I think baseball was almost like an introduction to that, for me and for however many other kids that play baseball.
Yeah, and you're right. And you learn to lose, and that's an
Yeah.
important skill, to be able to lose and move on. Right?
Hmm.
How many times were you in the car ride with your dad, and after you lost, and you're probably younger crying, and then when you're older, you're
Yeah.
just silent, but then you realize, hey, it's okay. And everyone loses, and winning is fun, and winning is better, and it's just part of life.
Right.
Diego, what's your favorite moment, either playing for Goleta Valley South or in high
Hmm.
school for the Royals? What's your favorite baseball memory?
So when I was 12 years old, our club baseball team played a tournament in Cooperstown, New York. So it's a pretty famous youth baseball tournament. Cooperstown is where the Baseball Hall of Fame is. Um, we're able to. It's tough to get into, um, but we were able to do it, and we ended up placing eighth out of 108 teams that came from all across the nation. We were the Santa Barbara Sharks. We were the farthest traveled team out of the whole pack, all the way out to New York. And just, yes, we placed eighth, and that was way beyond our expectations against these crazy teams from Florida and Texas. But it's just, you stay in the bunks for in the dorms for a whole week with it's a bunch of 12-year-olds and three chaperones that are your coaches, that are more, your friends than you look at as maybe adults. Um, and you're trading pins. Every team brings their own pins to Cooperstown. You're trading with other teams. You're meeting these kids from all across, you know, the country. And on top of it, you get to go play baseball once or twice a day. in between you're playing wiffle ball, you're eating at the dining hall, sitting next to a kid that, has grown up in North Dakota his entire life. And, I, I grew up on the beach in Santa Barbara, and they're fascinated by it. And so, that experience was so special, and it went so much farther. And I think it kind of opened my eyes to baseball and what sports can kind of do for a person, but also just like for anybody, for the world, to where you bring together all these people, they have nothing in common, but they all play baseball.
Yeah.
And you kind of put them in this huge kind of facility with, they're all sleeping in within feet of each other, and just the best time. And baseball is almost just like an added bonus. You kind of forget that you're there to play baseball while you're there. And, obviously the whole extra thing, you go to the Hall of Fame, the Cooperstown's such a cool area. It's where baseball was invented, so much history there. And so just having that whole experience, I would say, is my best kind of moment in my baseball career, just because of the bond that you create with the team that you go with, but also just the amount of people you can meet and play against. It's awesome.
Yeah, that's such a great 12-year-old experience, being able to
Mm-hmm.
play all stars if you can and go as far, in the Little League. That's the Little League World Series year. And,
Yeah,
so many, only a few can go there. And if you can raise enough money, you go to Cooperstown, and you can have
yep.
that experience, which is, life changing for so many kids. Because I'm not a sports writer covering high school, Diego, I'm going to ask you a tough question. Okay.
All right.
What's your worst memory on the field? Was it you let a ball go through your legs? Did you overthrow? Did you strike out? Or maybe it's just like a team thing, but what thing you going to be thinking about, 100 years from now when you're
um, yeah, so it's interesting because I have, the kind of, I've struck out 4 times in a game, and that's embarrassing in and of itself, just to say it. I've had games where I've had
it wasn't
errors.
against DP, right? So you can
No,
hold
it wasn't. I always played super well against DP. I don't know what it was. um, but um, my last game, senior year of high school, senior day, everything. Um, we were up by 1 run against San Ynez in the 7th inning, and there was a runner on third, 2 outs, and a little dribbler got hit. So like it popped up over the pitcher's head, and it kind of dribbled to me, and I went up, scooped it up, and went and tried to make the hero play because it was senior day, and I was feeling good and thought I was, on top of the earth, and I threw the ball in the other team's dugout, and they scored a run. Luckily, Real, shout out to Isaac, saved me with a walk-off double the very next inning. So ended my baseball career on a high note, but individually, that wasn't a very fun moment. And of course, I forgot about it as soon as,
Yeah.
Isaac hit that double, and we're all mobbing him in the middle of the field. But that's always one that sits there for a little bit. Thanks for bringing it up.
That's the thing about baseball is you go into the dugout that inning just thinking, oh my God, it's all my fault. And then
Yeah,
just like that, it changes, and that's the beauty
yeah,
of sport is you're always one, in that situation, you're like a swing away, from tying or whatever,
hmm,
someone's on. So that's great.
absolutely.
And Diego, just want to talk to you about Cal Poly before we wrap up.
Yeah.
So you chose to go kind of nearby, right? An hour and a half away or
Hmm.
so to university. What about that program? Like, what did you learn there? What did you take from it? What specific print online? What was your focus specialty on?
Yeah, so I graduated with a journalism degree with a concentration in public relations, and it was not necessarily a decision that was, I want to go into public relations, but um, I guess I'll just start from the beginning. I applied to Mustang News after committing to attend Cal Poly. Again, kind of got into journalism the fall of my senior year, and then knew that Cal Poly had a good journalism program, but other than the fact that you see on their website it says award winning, I didn't know much about it. So I applied to Cal Poly, got in, and accepted. Once I accepted, I said, all right, I want to get involved. I don't want to just, show up and be taking classes and that's my college experience. So I applied to Mustang News probably May of my senior year of high school. Um, and I got in, and then I began as a sports journalist in my first year. So I was, going to games, basically every sport that they offered. I was lowest on the rung, so I kind of got whatever nobody else wanted to cover, and so that was tennis, soccer, and then it eventually led to basketball, baseball, and that was great. It's a Mustang News now, post COVID, has moved to a monthly physical newspaper, but daily online. Um, and so, yeah, I began as a sports journalist my first year, but then COVID hit. Was March of my freshman year of college,
Mm.
and I remember I was walking over to the baseball field because Cal Poly was hosting University of Oklahoma, and I was super fired up to cover that game because you don't see the schools like the University of Oklahoma come to Cal Poly often, and I got the notification fans are not allowed, and I texted my editor, media members still allowed. He said, yep, you're good. And I walked about 50 more yards, and then the notification came, all Big West sports are canceled.
Oh.
And so I turned around right back to my dorm, and we were sent home a week later.
Mm.
So there we were forced to adapt to online only, zero face-to-face interactions, which I'm sure is very difficult, especially for me. I was kind of just getting the hang of journalism and being a journalist, going to games, interviewing players, coaches. You're forced to do nothing, and that kind of rolled over into the second year where there were no in-person classes, and I was only able to start going back to sporting events spring of 2021. And so around that time, I was interested in becoming the sports editor a little bit. The editor before me had reached out, and so I decided to apply, and then I was named the sports editor, which is the position I held for third and fourth year, junior, senior year. And, once COVID was over, really, kind of elevated my entire college experience, obviously, but I got so many opportunities to grow as a journalist and as a person. But as a journalist, before COVID, I was scared to interview people. Like, that was the one thing, is I'm naturally an introvert. And so it's kind of like, it takes me a little while to get up to doing that. But, by the end of COVID and by the time I was editor, I had gained that kind of confidence. And the Cal Poly journalism program is so amazing. It really follows that Cal Poly learn by doing slogan, where for classes, I would show up to a hour-long lecture, and the professor would say, all right, you guys can go out, just walk around campus and interview 3 people about blah blah blah, and that was the lecture for the day.
Mhm.
And so doing things like that is so valuable, and not many programs have that, kind of go out into the field and actually do, what we're setting you up to do post grad. Do it now, so that time you are post grad, it's smooth, and it's like you've done it 1,000 times before. And being in Mustang News only elevated that, because you on top of going out and doing all these things in classes, you're doing them, outside of class, going to sports games, talking to people. We got the opportunity to travel to Tulsa, Oklahoma to cover the NCAA wrestling championships for a senior project. Me and 2 of my classmates, Derek and Miles, our senior project, the Cal Poly senior project capstone course, is produce 2 multimedia stories throughout the quarter that kind of encapsulate everything you've learned with Cal Poly journalism. And so we did a story on the women's volleyball coach, Caroline Walters, photo, video, writing, editing, everything like that. Again, it kind of encapsulated everything. And then we decided to just follow our wrestling team for the whole season. And we were able to get the opportunity to go out to Tulsa, and that was super cool. But Cal Poly journalism is such an amazing program, and the learn by doing aspect is absolutely there, and it's so special because you get these experiences, and by the time I was graduated and joined Noozhawk, it was stuff that I've been doing for 2 years, and so it didn't seem as, you know, pressure. There was not as much pressure on me because I've written recaps before. I've interviewed coaches before. This is just like Cal Poly, just I'm doing it in Santa Barbara.
Mhm.
And so that program is so special, and it'll forever have a really big place in my heart. And I love Cal Poly.
That's great. Well, definitely, Diego, Noozhawk is a lot better and brighter in its future because of you. For however long you're going to grace us with your presence here. You know, you do a great job, and it's just impressive as somebody who's, you know, been doing this for 20 years, and you're at the beginning of your career to see somebody who's so enthusiastic, ambitious, talented, skilled, hungry, and local, right? Just has that context.
Yeah,
So you're kind of in the perfect place, the perfect time right now. And so I'm real excited to read Noozhawk Sports, keep reading it, and watch your coverage. So thanks a lot so much for being on the show and sharing a little bit about your story.
yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. It was super fun, and I look forward to, you know, continuing the coverage.
Yeah, the next one we'll do will be Pat McAfee style, and we'll just talk
Yeah.
sports.
We'll just talk trash the whole
We
time.
can I can do a show like that with you because you're a Dodger fan, so you're good.
Yeah, there you go. That's my end.
All right, take care. Thank you.
All right, you too.